Hello, I'm Joseph Dillard. Welcome to the Ideal Video Curricula. In this video, I want to share with you how easily some common logical fallacies show up in how we approach dreams and their interpretations, and how IDL avoids them. Logical fallacies are generally thought of as errors in communication with others or in our thinking. In our application here, we are applying logical fallacies to the ways we experience our dreams and the conclusions we draw about them, both while dreaming and later, while we are awake. By extension, if you learn to recognize and avoid them in relationship to your dreams, you will probably be more likely to stop using them yourself and more quickly detect when others are using them. Most of us are confident that we are thinking rationally. Why else would we call ourselves Homo sapiens? This is probably a major reason why most of us shut out most of our dreams. They not only are irrational to us, but threaten our identity as rational beings. Clearly, to be interested in dreams reflects at least a tolerance of, if not an outright enjoyment of, the irrational, pre-rational, and non-logical. We can respect and enjoy dreams on that level, but as soon as we attempt to interpret them, both after awakening and while asleep and dreaming, we are marrying the pre-rational and irrational with the rational and logical. We are coming up with some theory or causal explanation for why we dream and what this or that dream is about. Therefore, it is important to learn to think logically about dreams and not get caught up in this or that logical fallacy, both during a dream and later when we are attempting to understand it when awake. The first logical fallacy we will consider is called hasty generalization. Hasty generalizations are fallacies that occur when we base decisions on insufficient evidence. When we assume a dream image is a symbol, archetype, or make an interpretation of a dream without first consulting the image itself, that's a hasty generalization logical fallacy. So already, right at the beginning, we can see that almost the entire history of dream interpretation is based on at least one logical fallacy. We think we are approaching dreams in a rational way when we are looking at them through the filter of logical fallacies. The next logical fallacy to consider is called appeal to authority, and it is probably the second most common error in dream interpretation. Why do we accept this or that interpretation of a dream? Is it due to something we learned from consulting a dream dictionary or some dream expert? If so, that's an appeal to authority. IDEO also appeals to authority, but the authority of our interviewed dream characters, who are in a much better position to be able to claim an authoritative interpretation of a dream than outside experts or even ourselves. Their opinion is triangulated with the perspectives of objective authorities and our common sense, which conditions their authority. Appeal to tradition is a similar logical fallacy that is commonly encountered in Dreamwork. Because Tibetan Dream Yoga, Swapna Hindu Dream Yoga, Ayurveda, Freud, Jung, or some other historical tradition interprets dreams in a certain way, it's correct. Because we've always done it this way. We see that approach in assumptions that dreams arise out of the personal unconscious, collective unconscious, or superconscious, or symbolic, or involve parts, self-aspects, or sub-personalities. What makes someone an authority is the strength of their demonstration of their position and its acceptance by peers in the method. Those who have watched my video on Dream Yoga as a form of empiricism will already recognize these injunctive steps. According to Carl Sagan, quote, "One of the great commandments of science is mistrust arguments from authority. Too many such arguments have proved too painfully wrong. Authorities must prove their contentions like everybody else. The false dilemma logical fallacy is commonly present in how our dreams are understood. This fallacy occurs when a black or white false choice is presented. Either you are for us or against us. Either we torture the terrorist or he sets off the nuclear bomb. Either dream characters are self-aspects or they are objectively real. Limited alternatives are considered, when in reality there are multiple alternatives. For instance, it is common to assume we know a dream monster or fire was threatening us because that's what we experienced in the dream. The dream must be a warning of some threat. What is it? But have we considered the perspective of the monster or fire? If we haven't, we are committing the false dilemma logical fallacy because we haven't considered one or more alternative perspectives. This also illustrates the difference between psychological geocentrism and polycentrism. Do we only look at life from the perspective of ourselves, or do we practice experiential multi-perspectivalism toward our dreams? If we don't, we are approaching our dreams within the context of the logical fallacy of the false dilemma. The world is inherently ambiguous, and to force it into one or another absolutism shows either a lack of knowledge or the world, or a knowledge of the world, or an intentional desire to shut down thinking and appeal to emotion. Which brings us to the next logical fallacy. Appeal to emotion is another fallacy that is generally only considered in interaction with others. Appeals to fear, envy, hatred, pity, or pride are used instead of a logical argument, or to obscure the fact that there is no compelling rational reason for our position. In dreams, the equivalent occurs when we have an emotional reaction to a situation, such as a fear of a snake or attacker, and react based on that feeling, rather than on any rational inquiry as to its truth or foundation. Our position is, it was attacking me. That's enough reason. But if you can't die in a dream or be physically harmed, is fear, fight, or flight a rational response, or is it an appeal to emotion? The straw man logical fallacy occurs when someone misunderstands your position, declaring they have proven it incorrect when they have only disproven their misrepresentation of it. This very common fallacy shows up in dreams and dream interpretation when we misinterpret or fabricate the intention or meaning of this or that dream character. Of course, if we haven't consulted it, how do we know that their actual intention or meaning is? We can declare an extraterrestrial's intent is invasion and conquest, and then find that that is abhorrent and abusive, when that may be a straw man argument based on our ignorance of the extraterrestrial's actual motivations. Therefore, we can triumphantly declare we have accurately interpreted a dream when we have raised a false interpretation, because we have ignored the input of the perspective of the character, in this case, the extraterrestrial. Ad hominem is a form of changing the subject. Instead of attacking the argument, we attack the character of the person making the opposing argument. Essentially, ad hominem declares the other person is untrustworthy when the accuser is in the role of persecutor in the drama triangle, instead of addressing the argument based with a counter-argument, which is the rational and logical thing to do. We commonly attack the character of dreams and dreaming by assuming that they are irrational because that's how they look to us. But that is an ad hominem fallacy, in that it changes the subject from the nature and content of dreams to our own discounting perception of them. What we typically find when we interview dream characters or the personifications of life issues is that they are at least as rational as we are, and sometimes more so. When we are confronted with that rationality, it becomes clear that our discounting of dreams or of some image was an ad hominem fallacy. How are we to deal with logical fallacies? Clearly, the first step is to recognize them. The second is to stop using them. Calling out the use of a fallacy by someone else can itself be a fallacy when it is assumed that because another person has used a logical fallacy, that their argument is therefore wrong. Both can be true. You can make a fallacious argument in defense of a rational one. Also, calling out logical fallacies merely hardens positions without bringing the argument any closer to resolution. It is much better to take note of the fallacy and deal with it by doubling down on the presentation of evidence for your position than to say, "Aha, you just committed the straw man fallacy." This is about as effective as calling out someone's defense mechanisms. Take note that there's a logical fallacy, but resist the urge to play top dog. Instead, bolster your own argument with more data. IDEO avoids most logical fallacies by interviewing the personifications of life issues and dream characters, both in dreams and while awake, and testing their validity of their recommendations in our lives with triangulation. There are many more logical fallacies. Some of them are quite arcane. I hope this short introduction has served to demonstrate how a knowledge of logical fallacies and their avoidance is not only important for your relationships with others, but for understanding dreams. You will find the entire IDEO video curricula at integraldeeplistening.com. Thanks for watching. See you next time.